Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to continue with chapter number 6, Object Oriented Analysis. These are the contents from the chapter number 6. From that, we have seen iterative development, rational unified process, inception, and understanding the requirements. In this session, we are going to continue with inception, that is, business modeling. Here, inception means start. That is, this is the point where the project is proposed. Whether we are going to start any project or any software to develop, that time that inception phase means start of the project. So what is the aim of that inception phase? It constitute of business modeling. What is business modeling here? Defining the problem, scope of the system, and initiate the project. Yet defining the problem means we have to state the problem statement, what we are going to do for that, or whenever we are going to design that software, what is the actual problem definition for that software. Then scope of the system, what system is going to do, that is the scope of your system. Then we have to initiate the project, that is the start of the project. Then the purpose of inception phase, what is the purpose of that inception phase or the issues to be considered in inception phase. Like, first we have to define the problem. Defining the problem means we have to identify the requirements. Based on that requirements, we have to uh, identify the objectives of that project. Okay, that is, we have to define the problem based on the requirements and objectives. Then we have to define the scope of the system. That scope of the system constitute of that scope and boundary conditions, then acceptance criteria, and some requirements that are established. Then we have to identify the external entities. External entities in the sense actors that are going to interact with the system. We have to identify that external entities. Then outcome of that inception phase. So what is the outcome, or we can say that artifacts for that inception phase is that problem statement, the scope of the system. Okay, then we have identified that external entities and the problem definition. Then use case model from inception to elaboration. So we have seen in last chapters that what is use cases. Use case diagrams describes what the system will do. Whenever we are going to draw any use case diagram, based on that use case diagrams, or that use case diagram describes what the system is going to do with the given requirements. Then use case is a set of operations that a system will perform. Use case means it is a set of operations or set of sequences that the system is going to perform. So what are the benefits of use cases? Benefits like identifying the requirements based on that use uh, sorry after drawing the use case diagrams, we can easily identify the requirements, then easy understanding of the system. Whenever we are completed with the use case diagrams, based on that use case diagram, can easily understand the what the system is, the flow of the system. Then helpful in designing the test cases. Use case diagram is helpful to design the test cases for testing. Then next one is elaboration. Elaboration phase consists of requirements, analysis, and design. Elaborate means refinement, that is careful development. Based on the requirements, we have to analyze that requirements, and based on that analysis, we have to design. So what are the issues that we are going to consider in elaboration phase? That is, we have to identify the problem domain. What is the actual problem definition is that we are going to design. That is, we have to identify that problem domain. Then we have to examine the highest possible risk in that design. There are several issues that we can consider while designing or uh, designing that software, that there are some issues that are considered in that elaboration phase, like we have to identify the requirements, identify the problem domains, we have to analyze that problem domain based on that requirements, and that we have to design that requirements, we have to design, and based on that analysis we are going to design that system. Then what is the outcome or the artifacts of that elaboration phase is, at the end of this phase 80% of the task is completed. That means after analysis and the design, that 80% of the task is completed. That means after that we have remain only with the construction and transition. That means we have to implement, and we have to test that, and we have to deliver that product or the project. This is all about elaboration phase. That means in elaboration phase, we are going to identify the requirements, we are going to analyze that requirements, and we are going to design a model or a prototype model. Then next phase is construction phase. Construction phase includes implementation and test. Here construction means we have to build. Build is, that is, it is a manufacturing process. Manufacturing of software, or we are going to implement that design in the sense we have seen in previous phase, that is elaboration phase. We have created one prototype model for that requirements that we are having with the problem domain. Okay, based on that design we are going to implement that system. So what are the issues to be considered in this phase? Here this phase is broken into several iterations, like the size, speed, then complexities, then domains. Okay, then we have to check the qualities. While constructing that software, we have to consider several parts about that requirement, based on that requirements, like that complexity of the system. Then we have to test that system. Then construction's outcome, what are the outcome after that implementation of this design? After implementation, what we will get an executable product, executable product of that problem domain we are having, executable product or the complete complete system we are having now. Okay, so that is ready to put in the hands of the end user. That means we are going to deliver to that end user. Then that software product is integrated on that adequate platform. That means the platform we are going to deliver that product, that software is integrated with that platform. Then a user manual, that means user manual for that particular design or particular software or that particular product. That user manual consists of the instructions or the documents that we have to follow for that particular design. Then description of that current release, that means current release means that our software product. So this is the construction phase. In that we are going to implement and test that product. Then next phase is transition phase. Transition phase means deployment. A transition means delivery. The transition phase is the phase where the product is put in the hands of its end users. We are going to hand over that product to the end user. That is deployment of the system. A deployment is the main of transition phase. That includes the marketing, packaging, installing, configuring that product, then give the training to the end user about that product, then checking the quality based on the requirements of that product. Then what are the issues that are considered in the transition phase? Like we have to deliver the software product to the end user, then we have to correct the problems. That means is there any, if any problem is found at the deployment, then we have to correct that problems. Then what is the outcome? That achieving user self supportability. After deployment, what we will achieve, that support self supportability, user self supportability or satisfaction of that user. Okay, this is all about transition phase. So we have seen inception phase, that is business modeling. Then elaboration phase, that means elaboration phase consists of requirement, analysis and design. Then we have seen construction phase. Construction means we have to implement based on the design and we have to test that. Then next phase is transition phase. We have seen about deployment. Then next one is the 9 workflows. Here you can see one diagram. The 4 phases of RUP are there. 4 phases of RUP, that is here you can see business modeling, then requirements, analysis and design. That means this is the elaboration part and this is the inception part. Here you can see. Then implementation means it is the construction phase and deployment means transition phase. Okay. Here you can see this is the RUP. Then at last iteration, if that iteration is okay, then proceed with and end that flows, and otherwise if iteration is not okay, then again start with the next iteration from the requirements. Okay, so this is 9 workflows. Here you can see 4 phases of RUP and there are 6 core workflows. Here here there are 6 core and 3 supporting process workflows involved in 4 phases, which represents a partitioning of all workers and activities into logical groups. Here you can see 4 phases of RUP and this again 3 supporting process workflows. That's why it is total 9 workflows in this figure. You can see 9 workflows are there. Okay, so that are business modeling, understanding the requirements, analysis and design, then implementation, testing, deployment, configuration and change management, then project management and environment. So we will see that one by one. So business modeling, we have seen that that means inception. So what is the purpose of that business modeling or this workflow? The purpose of this workflow is to model the business context and the scope of our system. Yeah, this workflow is conducted usually in inception and the elaboration phase. We have seen that that inception or that elaboration phase includes that business modeling. So what is the goal of this business modeling? So document business process using use cases. We have to document that business processes using use cases. So that means this assure a common understanding among all the stakeholders of that business process. This is the business modeling. In that we have to activate workers during the process. That means the business process analyst and business designer and business model reviewer. These are the active workers during this business modeling process. The next one is understanding the requirements. So purpose of this workflow is we have to identify the requirements for the particular that problem domain or the project, including their identification, modeling and documentation. So goal of this process is software requirement process, software requirement specification, that is SRS, which which encompasses the capture requirements. We have to identify the requirements or we have to understand the requirements. That means we have to check the requirements based on the problem definition. That means here it describes that the system should do and allows the developers and the customers to agree on that description of that requirements. Then third one is analysis and design. Here the purpose of this workflow is to develop a robust architecture for the system based on the requirements we have identified, to transform the requirements into a design. We have to transform that requirements into a design and to ensure that implementation issues are reflected in that design. If then the goal of analysis is to determine the risk, then stability of the product. Then the goal of the design is to show how that system will be understood in the implementation phase. The active workers are active worker sorry active workers in this analysis and design phase or this process is architect and the designer. These are the active workers in the analysis and design process. So what is the work of designer? That is use case analysis, use case design, then class design, and next one is implementation phase. The purpose of that implementation is to test code and test the system. The goal of that implementation is to develop a ready to execute module independent of other modules. We have to develop the modules based on the design or the based on the prototype model. So what are the active workers during this process? Implementer, then integrator and code reviewer. These are the three active workers during this implementation phase. So what is the work for that implementer? Implementer means we can say the developer. So implementer or the developer have to develop the module, fix a defect, then perform the testing. Then integrator, there are three active workers in this process, that is developer, that is implementer, then integrator. Integrator has to plan the system integration, then subsystem integration, integrate the subsystem, and at last third active worker is code reviewer. Code reviewer has to review that code that is implemented by the implementer. Then next one is testing. Here testing, the purpose of the test workflow is to design the test cases based on the implementation or by using that use cases. So the goal of the test process is to design and execute the test cases. So what are the active workers during this process is test designer and tester. So what is the task for the test designer? Test designer has to plan the test, design the test, then implement the test cases, then evaluate the test cases. And the work of the tester is the tester has to execute the test cases. And sixth one is deployment. Deployment means we have to hand over or we have to deploy that software to the end user. Then the goal of that deployment is to deliver the system to the user community. That involves, we have seen that deployment involves that issues of marketing, packaging, installing, configuring and supporting that user community and making the corrections. So what are the active workers during that deployment process? That deployment manager and technical writer. So work of deployment manager here to develop the deployment plan, manage acceptance tests and define the bill of materials at the deployment. And that second active worker is technical writer. That work of the technical writer is write release notes and develop support material, that is user manual. Then seventh one is configuration and change management, that is CM. The purpose of that configuration and change management is to monitor and administrate changes in the project work so that they are consistent with the requirements. If after deployment is there any change in that project, at the time it can perform that change management of that project or administrate that changes. Then the goal of that change management is to release and control the version of the system. Then what are the active workers during this process? Configuration manager and change manager. So that work for that configuration manager is set up that change management environment and establish the policies and write the plan for that configuration. Then work of that change manager. Change manager will do establish change control process and review the change request. Then eighth one is project management. Project management means all about to manage the objectives and risk and overcoming the constraint so that to deliver a successful product which meets the needs of both clients and that user. So that active workers during this process is project manager and project reviewer. So the project manager will initiate the project, develop the iteration plan, develop quality assurance plan, and monitor the project status and schedule and assign the work to that based on that specialty and report the status to the project manager and handle the exceptions and problems. Then next active worker in this phase is project reviewer. What project reviewer will do? Approve the approval of that review, then planning review, then iteration plan review. Okay, and the last workflow is environment. Yeah, the purpose of that environment workflow is to provide the software development organization with software development environment. Then the active workers during this process is process engineer and software architect and the tool specialist, the tool or that environment we are going to use for that deployment. Then these three active workers will perform some tasks. That work for that process engineer is develop cases, development of case, then project specific templates. Then software architecture will design the guidelines for that particular design and that programming guidelines for that uh, prototype or that we can say design. Then tool specialist will work for tools and design some guidelines for that particular tool. So this is all about these 9 workflows. There are 6 core and 3 supporting process workflows are involved in the 4 phases of RUP, that is Rational Unified Process. We have seen all these 9 workflows. Okay. So in this way, we have finished with chapter number 6. So that's it for today's session. We will stop here.